you can be creating a lot of success, but if you're not savoring and experiencing the fulfillment of what you're doing, the accomplishments along the way, you'll always be chasing the dragon of fulfillment without actually experiencing it. Everything's about managing your energy, not your time. Being radically authentically yourself and being emotionally and energetically available. And just knowing who you are and just bringing that, all of that energy and that bright light is enough.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Relief Podcast, where we interview business leaders and influential people, and in today's case, influential people. So, see, we start off there with a joke. Welcome Stacy Raske to the program. Stacy, thanks for being here today.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to chat and dive into some good, juicy stuff.
Yeah, and so I have been to several of your events. I respect your journey. Of course, also sharing open and vulnerable nature, because a lot of people kind of just show the social media perfect picture of who we are and what we're supposed to do, and that, in my case, has actually limited some of my growth. When I look at that impossible standard, right, and then I see people who've hit the standard, but share that, hey, I don't always have a good day. What does it mean to you to put your real self out there?
It's been honestly the differentiator between struggle and success. It was the first few years in business, I hid a lot of who I was, wearing that mask of who I should be, playing the role, still fitting in that sort of uh, corporate identity box that I'd shoved myself into for so long of, just playing by the rules. And it was when I decided to take off that mask and really show all of me in my full radical ownership and authenticity, flaws and scars, power and awesomeness, and like all points in between. And that was when my business became successful. That's when my brand became successful. My clients started getting better results. Like everything improved.
Right. So and I think I noticed it from my own experience, having gone to some of your events, having gone to some of the similar conferences and the same people that are in our circles. That imposter syndrome, feeling like you're not worthy, deserving of success, knowing what to do, knowing how to do it, and not actually doing it. Like, and now you are helping the former versions of you, I imagine, in your coaching and advisory work, so that they can step up and, step to the plate and be their best selves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody. I think that's the thing is like it I know when I was really in my early days of big growth and expansion too, it was, the doubt monster. Like the monster under the bed. And the imposter syndrome were really huge. And it's so funny how and I think too is just being in that space. It's one of those stuck points where it flares up when we're in survival mode. And survival mode happens when you're creating that stress response. And so I don't know about you, but that's like constant in entrepreneurship or personal growth, right? We're always doing something new, uncomfortable, quote unquote, unsafe. So our primitive brain is getting triggered. So when survival brain's activated, we absolutely shut down to opportunities and teamwork. So that's part of why when you're feeling the doubt and the imposter syndrome and everything, you feel very alone. Like you're the only one. Nobody understands, right? And I think we all go through that phase and that era of like, nobody gets me, especially if you're not surrounded by a lot of big thinkers or visionaries or entrepreneurs or impact-driven people. Then you really are alone because you don't have like-minded people to connect with and talk to. And so it was the biggest lesson was learning, oh my gosh, this is not unique. Everybody struggles with that feeling. And it's a beautiful gift because every time we have any of those negative experiences, it's a messenger of exactly what's off. And it's something you have control over, because if you feel like an imposter, what that's telling you is you're actually doing the big things. So you're taking the actions, you're doing the imperfect action, you're doing the stuff, right? You're making yourself really uncomfortable. But what's not caught up with is what you think and believe about yourself. That's it. Smaller, it's significantly smaller than this kind of ambiguous concept that it can feel very overwhelming. But it's always remembering, when we feel the doubt, when we feel the imposter, we're looking in the wrong direction, right? Obviously, we want to be forward facing and vision driving and moving the needle forward and all of those things. However, you can get tunnel vision on looking ahead of you. From where you are to the horizon never changes. That distance is always the same, because as you move forward, the horizon moves forward. That gap will never close. Once you accept that the gap will never close, you stop relying on that for validation. But that's why we feel like an imposter. We're only seeing the gap versus looking behind you at all of the evidence of your success, all of your wins, all the successes, all the accomplishments to this point, all the education, the lessons learned, the failures that you've survived to get to where you're at now. And every step you take forward adds more evidence for success, even though the gap in front of you never gets smaller.
So I guess the quote, Goggins, the work is never finished.
Exactly.
So there's always something to look forward to. So one thing that I love in your work is how you kind of pivot perspectives, right? Having also gone through some really heavy duty depression, PTSD type issues, and a lot of the audience is dealing with stuff, whether they share it or they have therapy, friends, or support or don't. What would you suggest?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting because it's easy to lose sight of what's good and what we're grateful for when we're vision driving. So, you can get stuck in the mud and sometimes not even realize it, right? So, like, on paper, you look successful. On social media, you look successful. And yet, some of that imposter syndrome is because of our unwillingness to receive. We're blocking the receiving of the things that we want. We're just moving, just drudging through doing the actions, but not letting who we're being, the identity, catch up. So, as we're continuing to move forward and drive that vision, it's giving yourself an opportunity to take a step back and really take stock and evaluate where you're at. Because you can be creating a lot of success, but if you're not savoring and experiencing the fulfillment of what you're doing, the accomplishments along the way, you'll always be chasing the dragon of fulfillment without actually experiencing it. And so when you're in the mud, you could be deeply, deeply, deeply depressed and it be obvious. But honestly, most of us are really high functioning. But with that high functioning, we're getting an ROI because the high functioning creates control issues. And with those control issues, we get a result. We're getting the return on investment because it's hustle, it's control, it's perfection. It's all of these things that are really well accepted as high performance traits, but really they're not. And so you can be really highly functioning and still feel like you're struggling internally. So it really is. I mean, it's all of the things that we know to do, but we don't actually do it. But those are the things that actually create the results, like gratitude, right? And so I challenge people, when you're in that space of only seeing the negative because your survival brain is so turned on because of high stress, right? Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn are going to have that in overdrive. And when you're in that state, it's hard to see the positive. So I always start with doing daily gratitudes around the challenges, around the things that are hard. So it's basically saying, okay, I'm grateful for the friction in my marriage because I'm learning how to be a better partner. I'm grateful for the cash flow inconsistency because I'm seeing where I had blind spots and I'm learning how to create additional revenue streams, right? So all of a sudden, you're in this state where you're able to create gratitude for the challenges and the hardships you're experiencing simply because you're focusing on the lessons you're learning from it. So now you have value from anything that's happening. And if you can do that with what's happening in the moment, think about how powerful it is for you to pivot when looking your lens towards the past. Now you can look back and say, okay, I'm grateful for that happening because I learned X, Y, and Z. As soon as that past has value from the lessons and you're able to look at it as the observer, you're not triggered by it anymore. And now it's a completely different ball game. Rather than holding on to baggage that weighs you down, you're actually gaining momentum to move forward from all of the lessons. And
Wow. I mean, that's just profound. Like, so, and again, so, when you hear things like this, you're like, it's evident you've done the inner work, right? Like, 'cause there's a lot that comes out of that to say, um, sometimes we don't step into our full power if we still kind of are carrying around baggage from the past, right? And so one thing that you've shared a lot in your work is the power of letting go and being and stepping into that flow, right? Because you've built a movement based on being influential. So if you could speak for a moment into the movement and what's inspired you to kind of to be a teacher and a coach and an advisor. It's a small technical snafu, but like all things, we get back on and move forward, right, Stacy? We
we
roll
roll
with
with
it,
it.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
I
we
mean, I
roll with it.
imagine like you've been on stages, right? And maybe like you forgot your notes or somebody else didn't show up, right? Like how do you just kind of make sure that the show carries on?
Exactly. Well, the biggest thing is not reacting. I mean, it's like when all is said and done, what's happening in the moment, is it going to matter, a year from now, 20 years from now? Like, it's just perspective. And so it's just being in a state of what I like to call just unconditional. It doesn't matter what the external conditions are, nothing's going to fuck with my flow. Right? Like, I am in control of what's happening in here, not the other way around, right? Not what's happening out there. I used to be that way. And it got me down a deep, dark place and was not my best physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, socially, any of it. And so being able to just roll with whatever, because nothing's ever that catastrophic, ever. And it's so important to know that because when people are struggling to put boundaries into place, right, create that discipline and consistency for themselves to basically say, I'm self parenting my inner child that wants the instant gratification of, I want it right now, right? Let's just right, and understanding that is a self-soothing is what we're doing, whether it's I want ice cream right now, so I'm gonna indulge in the craving, or the text message comes in at 8:30 p.m. from the client and I'm gonna respond because it's uncomfortable to hold to the no. But as we're putting those boundaries in place, it becomes easier and easier when we're not always attached to reacting to what's these external stimuli are.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's
true,
freedom. That's freedom.
truly. And then what I equate freedom being not just like financial time and then just speaking into your full purpose, right? And you help a lot of business leaders and professionals kind of not only believe in themselves but kind of achieve peak performance, right? and
Mhm.
you host an event, for instance, at Yankee Field right there out in Tampa area, right? Like,
Yeah,
I
the
know,
training
and
field.
and you know what it is, like getting there on the field, in the dugout, the bench, so all those areas, right? And just being a part of that. Like, let's say people are in the little leagues of life, and then they want to get to the minor leagues, and then they aspire to get into the big leagues, right? How do people go into something they've never gone into? Because, you mentioned about the comfort zone, right? And people know their surroundings, they know the circle, right? Or how do you go into that new circle? Like, we already talked about imposter syndrome, but now you're like, all right, I'm kind of ready, but I don't know how to show up to this bigger stage.
Yes. No, I love it. That's such a great question. So, it's understanding the stories and the meaning we're assigning to things. Because what makes the next room different from the room you're in, other than the meaning you're assigning to it, right? I mean, it was every time I changed my offers as far as like the investment. And when I went from 1,500 to 15,000 for the exact same program, what did that mean for everybody? Well, when I 10x'd my identity that knew and owned the value of the experience for the client, they showed up. The 15K clients showed up because the $1,500 clients, I wanted it more than they did. Right? Like they're half in, half out. But what's funny is the 15K clients were already in my ecosystem. They were already following me, they were already listening, but they never made the leap to investing until I stepped into the leader they needed me to be. And that was at that 15K level for that program. When I stepped into that space, they stepped up, paid in full, and they got amazing results,
They say the more you pay, the more you
right?
pay attention, right? So, you know,
Exactly. And it's the same thing with the
mm,
rooms. Different rooms. They're same people with the same problems. Their bank account or their business may just have a different number of zeros behind it, right? Or their network. I mean, I'm talking to the people that I'm talking to now that are in my network, the relationships that I'm building. I could have never imagined the specificity of the level of impact and influence with the people that I know now. And like the further up you go, the smaller the world gets, and you realize everybody's there's people are just people, right? We're assigning so much meaning to their profession if they're like a musician or an actor or a professional athlete. But it's just a job like your job, just different job, right? We're all just people.
but you're vibing in higher circles now, right? So, you speak
Mhm.
like it's like a common language, right? As if it were, it's like learning Chinese, Russian, Spanish, etc. It's the language of high intention, you know, attraction rather than chasing, right? Because as you said, and I was on the other end. I was the person who was suspect of. I don't know. Everyone's out there offering things for $1,000 and $1,500 at the time. So I'm like, I don't know if it's for me. But now I'm like, oh wait, because that's where I am now. Is I am the client of people who offer things that cost more, not just because they cost more. Because like you said, if it's the same menu, from the same messenger who offered it at 1,500, then it's not the same offer. But you've walked through a bunch of new rivers since, I last saw you. So this is the new you, right? So the stronger self that you bring, you can bring others to, right? By leading through example. And then you've also served, right? So talk about how your time in the military has prepared you to kind of build good habits and discipline.
um Hilariously, it
Okay.
didn't. It didn't. So what what a lot of people struggle with when they get out of military service is the fact that discipline is given to you. They create the structure. You never learn your own necessarily. That doesn't mean it becomes a part of your identity and who you are, and having boundaries and discipline and consistency with yourself. So when we transition out, so many military uh, struggle with that sense of identity and that sense of loss of community and structure and vision and mission and purpose, because all of these things were given to you, but you're never really taught to create it on your own. Some get it. And a lot of that comes from being in the right circles and having the right mentorship and leadership during their time in service. And especially for people who are in for a really long period of time, versus some of us who only got to be in for a short period of time. So the biggest lesson that I learned was the fact that, boundaries, discipline, consistency, this is an inside job. And so that was really the big takeaway that I learned from the struggle transitioning out. And it took a long time. It took 10 years after I got out before I had that kind of rock bottom moment, wake up call of, I have to make a big change. And the big change was, I'm done trying to control anything other than myself. And so what I started doing bit by bit by bit was focusing on one small thing that was within my control that I could do today. And that was it. And it became a goal that was about an experience of, I just want to feel good. I want to be healthy. I want to get off my medications. I want to love my life again. I want to learn to love myself. And when that became the goal and it wasn't tied to a number, a size, a number on the scale, a number in my bank, like everything shifted. And it was just the little things I could do that were within my control. What am I putting in my body? What am I doing with my body? What am I choosing to feed my soul by reading or watching TV? Or what am I listening to, right? All of those things, each and every one of us have control over. And so it's about enacting the power of choice.
And everything is a choice, and that's where people can say, like, having worked with in recovery centers, even addiction is a choice. I mean, again, some people could argue one way or the other, but it, that negative choices stack. So do negative habits and negative thinking. And then if you're starting planting positive thoughts and affirmations onto yourself, even when you don't fully believe it, they sink in. And again, my head is made of a thicker grade of concrete than most, with a lot of steel rebar and fail safes, but somehow it found its way in, right? And I think one thing that we have to let go of is that everyone learns and grows at different paces.
Mm-hmm.
So just because someone picks up the lesson in like a day, and someone takes a month, they still grow. They're still positive.
Yeah. Everybody's pace and journey is different. And I think that's really important too when people are in long-term relationships, right? When we have a significant other or spouse, when we have parents and siblings and children, we're all on our respective journeys, and it's your journey at your pace. And you can't, control theirs. And I think that's really hard when one person's just going at the speed of light and the other person's very slow.
So that's like,
Like you,
and I've gone fishing with your husband, and it's been fun, right? And the fish that
yeah.
we caught, like, I got to see a dolphin that day. Came up to the boat. I wanted to pet the dolphin. They're like, no, don't touch the dolphin.
I forgot you guys went fishing. I totally forgot
But
about
then
that.
you're like, I'm like, I'm not used to it. They're like, oh, come on out. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. They're like, we'll teach you. I'm like, all right, cool. Right. So that being like that curious student, right, is I think what a lot of advisors say is like, don't be stuck on what you've been holding on to. Drop that off. You're good. You're in trusted hands who helped other people grow and be in their full strength and that's what you do, right? Is help people build their personal brands, among other things, right? And
Mhm.
what
Yeah,
differentiates what
it's all of it.
differentiates somebody now? Because we're in a crowded landscape. What
Mhm.
what would what's one thing that you would suggest people do to kind of stand out?
Radical
Mm.
authenticity. It is unapologetically being you. And that in itself makes people uncomfortable. And because of that, there are going to be haters and negative responses and all of that. And if you're no longer attached to the need for the external validation because you're good with you, it doesn't matter. That making people uncomfortable is a good thing because it's just challenging the status quo, and it helps plant seeds in the right direction. It's all positive stuff, but just being radically authentically yourself and being emotionally and energetically available and just knowing who you are and just bringing that, all of that energy and that bright light is enough. That's the most important thing. Knowing that is your value, your genius is being you, and especially the things that are easy and effortless for you. And when you just own that and roll with it, man, that's fun. Not being the governor or the gatekeeper or the dimming of your own light all the time, trying to not be too anything, right? Don't be too loud. Don't be too smart. Don't be too funny. Don't be too stubborn. Don't question too much, like don't talk too much, like whatever these things are that, we tell ourselves that we just hold ourselves back all the time. And yeah, I mean, that is the biggest thing that has opened up the doors to opportunities in relationships, because I laugh. It was like making the leap from 1500 to 15K was like 7, 8 years ago, and then to take that and then start 10xing it again, right? With new rooms that I'm going into, doing big scale consulting on 8 and 9 figure organizations that have plateaued, and it's like, oh, we need help. Right. And I get to bring in, I'm doing not only this internal development with the individuals, but we're also doing the systems and automations as well, building out um, systems and automations and software to really help streamline and make businesses more efficient and people more efficient, because profit is not about more, it's actually about less. It's about having people doing less in their zone of genius, which is more fulfilling, more highly performing. So every person is expanding their individual capacity, and then the business capacity improves and increases, which means greater profit, greater performance, greater team retention, greater client retention, and greater valuation of the organization as a whole, because it's all about capacity.
And so, I mean, first, tremendous, but then how does that feel? Like when you're like someone's basically climbing a new Everest, right? A new mountain, right? And you're addressing whether they be internal issues, team issues, scaling issues, system issues, whatever issues come up, you're basically prepared through your experience and talent stack to get them where they need to go, right? And when there's a little bit of resistance in the process, right? Because when you hear the word system, oof, well, you say the word system like 10 more times, I'll start cringing. Right? And I'll hit, you talk about the 4 F's. I would hit the freeze, the, the avoidance, right? You're like, oh,
Yes.
so how
Yes.
do we go about embracing the boring? Because you mentioned earlier, we got to hit our zone of genius.
Yeah.
But before we get there, we got to have some structure
It's
behind us so
boring.
that when people work with us, they,
You
they know how
do.
to do it.
Exactly. So this is the beauty of how I approach having systems. So discipline is a result, not a starting point. Consistency is a result, not a starting point. Boundaries are the rules to the game. The systems is the board you're playing on. So the systems are simply the bumpers on the bowling lane so you don't go in the gutter.
Well, I've thrown a lot of
That's it.
gutter shots in my life. So
Right? We all have. We all have. So when people are very visionary, very high energy, big thinkers, right? The last thing we want is to be put in a box. And the idea of systems, structure, or discipline, all bad words, at least in my world, all bad words, they were, for me, I was like, resistance, right? I was like, these are things that are going to slow me down. I'm in my genius. I'm doing my thing. I'm like, I need the freedom, right? But what ends up happening is if you think about it like water flowing like a river, well, if there's no riverbanks, what happens to the water? It goes, bleh. It just floods everywhere. And you see that. You see so many amazing, genius people just flooding the banks because there's no riverbanks to guide the flow towards the desired outcome. So now you can take all this visionary genius, creativity, innovative thinking, all of this, and funnel it towards what you want. And it's just the balancing of the masculine feminine energy that we all have. And we have to utilize both. And the masculine energy is just the structure. And systems can be as simple as a paper tracker of AM and PM routine, right? Did I do my gratitudes? Did I take my supplements? Did I do my hormone injection? Did I do, did I read? Did I plan my day? Whatever that is. PM, similar stuff, right? Wins and successes, supplements, whatever. Sleepy tea, right? What's my sleep hygiene routine every night? Those things, that's a system. It's a system to support success. It doesn't have to be complicated tech overwhelm. But the reason this is vital is you will never be able to effectively delegate if you don't learn how to first automate. You have to be able to craft systems to remove yourself from the process because you've been able to document the process and then remove yourself from the process before handing it off to someone and successfully making them responsible for the outcome of it. This is why so many visionaries really struggle with effective delegation and leadership. They never learned how to remove themselves from being the bottleneck to the problem.
I'm going through that now, right? It's starting to document all the process steps involved in getting there. When delegating to an assistant, and it's like, okay, well, so before I would sit there and say, okay, let me build a task list of what you could be doing. Now I'm like, well, how do you think you can help me? This is where I am. This is what I need. And actually, after our call today, I'm going to get on that call. And so this is the stuff that I used to avoid, right? Because I'm like, I'll do it one day, and then one day is not one of the days of the week, right? I keep trying. It's not in there. How do you like you said, you have chaotic, creative visionaries like myself, and how do you sit there and say, all right, keep space for being creative, right? Because that's the fuel for new inventions, ideas, processes, but also kind of embrace structure and system as part of the routine. And if you wouldn't mind, like as driven entrepreneurs, we don't know how to turn things off. And you mentioned a little bit about the wind down routine, right? Like, would you say openly, like, we should just set a window of time, maybe an 80-20 rule to say, hey, occasionally we're going to have late night events like you host, somewhere, and it might go to 10, 11, and that's okay. And,
Yeah,
and somehow still run a
absolutely.
positive routine where, hey, no matter what, you wake up in the morning, you go to the gym, or you go for a walk, or you maintain your practices, right? Because practice makes you
Mhm. Or
oh, that's
travel,
true,
right? How often
all the
do we
time.
travel? And then the second you travel, you're like, routine's out the window.
Right, right. No, no,
Right?
but it's like maintaining that new us, who we are, who we maintain
Mhm.
ourselves to be, so that when we get on stage, when we present, when, like, even here, right? Let's say, I just to be open, I didn't wake up my full best self, right? But
Mhm.
I went to the gym. right? And maybe
Yeah.
last year I didn't know what I was doing at the gym. And I still don't fully know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it a little better, right? And I think that's just a
Yeah.
lesson. That's a
You're
lesson for
doing it.
life, right? Is okay, well, the results are starting to show. I'm not fully chiseled out, but I'm still building out my David, right? Yeah. So David
There
was
you
a
go.
humble person, right? But then slew a giant, right? And how would you say, if someone has that giant, problem, right? Breaking it down into small steps. Like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of us as entrepreneurs are stuck on step one. No?
Actually, I find where what happens is they get stuck because they skip steps 1 through 3 and jump right to 27 and never build a
Oh,
foundation.
guilty, guilty.
Yeah. No, totally guilty as charged. Every story I tell, even about a client, is also I walked that path myself. So yeah, I was like, mirror. So that is usually what we're having to do. So like for me, it was everything that I recognize now is my zone of genius is my ability to identify the blind spots. That's why it doesn't matter if it's a people problem, a systems or process problem, a leadership problem, or an identity problem, or a values. Like it doesn't matter what the problem is. I can just be the mirror to reflect back to you what the blind spot is. And I also can think I have creative problem solving or innovative problem solving in a way where I can say, okay, now that we see the gap, the blind spot, here's how
Mm.
to close it.
Well,
So,
all right, let's address one of my blind spots. Networking,
hmm,
networking.
okay.
I mean, I've gone to some of your events and I'm sometimes shy. How do I talk to
Hmm.
somebody without bothering them, right? Or reframe it and say, what's the better way to maintain yourself and kind of say your piece and be out there and maybe follow up with
Hmm.
people after you meet at an event because that's where I kind of lack is building that
Ooh,
system to say,
yeah.
you know what, it was great talking to you for a half hour and getting to know you and your mission and what you stand for. How can we help each other? How can we stay in touch
Hmm.
in any kind of fashion and form? And again, part of that overthinking on my side is, hey, I don't want to lose this, but I'm going to lose it anyway if I don't stay in touch with someone.
Okay. Perfect question. So, and this ties perfectly to what you were asking about earlier, too, with that sort of push pull with the systems, right? So, the core thing that I focus on is that everything's about managing your energy, not your time. And that's why, even if you do have the occasional late night or you have the travel stressors, right? It's building in some buffer for life, right? There's times where we need to adjust what our expectations are for ourselves because of changes in the conditions. But there's a difference between planning for it and doing it proactively, or having it happen reactively, right? By default. Very different. There are times where I just consciously choose to say, no, I'm going to do these things instead. But it's a conscious choice, or I have an intention and a purpose behind it, right? That's what all of the systems and structure allow me to do, be present and conscious and proactive with the choices that I make rather than always being this putting out the fires and reacting to everything. So, in that situation, right, it's about managing your energy with networking or going to events. So, where can you create systems to do the stuff you don't like to do? I am also the same way. The follow up for me is a drain. If somebody gives me a business card, I'm like, just scan my QR code and put your info in. Jesus, like, just stop. It's the 21st century, people, but that's okay, right? That's how they're choosing to network and interact. I do it this way. So for me, I know I don't like to manually put the card info in my CRM, right? So what I've done is my system is the QR code They scan it, they open it up. I'm like, hey, let's trade contact info. Super cool. It's fun. It's got my energy to it. And they put in their little contact info, and then it immediately texts them my contact card. Then it immediately follows up. Awesome. I'd love to continue our conversation somewhere we could actually hear each other, not in a networking event. Here's the link to book a call, right? So they can book a virtual coffee with me. And then it just follows up 2 days later if they haven't. And then it nudges again like 5 days later. And then after, I think like 2 weeks or something, by like a month out, it'll create a task for me to just do a manual outreach to see if we can, I can get on their calendar or whatever the case may be. But it's allowing technology, sometimes it's text, sometimes it's not, but allowing systems that you make, whatever they are, to be something you trust to do the stuff you don't like to do. Whatever drains your energy, that's what you need to automate or have a system around it, right? The bumpers on the bowling lane. If I know I'm going to derail on follow-up or follow-through, I need bumpers. So what do those bumpers look like? So for me, it was creating this automation around my organic networking. Huge game changer. And the coolest thing for me is with our systems and automations agency, I'm now a product of my product. And everybody's like, man, this is cool. They book a call like, can you demo this? Is this yours? Like, this is awesome. I need this. We need that. We're dropping, right? I'm giving context to solving somebody else's problem. And they want to learn more, right? Which is super fun. Super fun. And then with the managing energy too, right? I know how to manage my energy at an event throughout the day. So if I need to leave the room and just step into another room and kind of get a breather for a second, I do that, right? I don't worry about shooting myself. The number one thing is the mindset that I heard from you is if you think you're bothering them, why would you be bothering them?
Well, again, it's more of and again, we've been to enough of these rooms where, a lot of things feel like a measuring contest. How big our company is going, how many employees we have, where we've been, what we've done, what's our new car, what's our new vacation. And so sometimes, and again, sometimes it's feeling like you're not enough, or that you have,
Ah.
that you bring value to that person, right? Um, and
Mm.
how, even if it's even needed to bring value, rather than just, like I've learned
Mhm.
from people like David Meltzer, it's better to be interested in someone than interesting.
Exactly. I was just going to say, do you need to bring value if you know your value?
Right. And again, it's more of like trying to shed
Mhm.
layers of yourself, right? Like you said,
Yeah.
you're shedding skin, entering new seasons of life and growing,
Yeah.
and you're like, wait a minute, why am I still hanging on to this? You're like, it's like emotional residue. It's like if I've been the deer in headlights,
Yeah.
driving along and bugs hit and there's all kinds of mess hitting my windshield. I'm like, I got to clean this up. So I can just hit the
Yeah.
windshield wipers, or I can pull off and clean it properly.
I made it a point to change the rooms I was being in, right? If I'm in the rooms where all they're measuring is the external stuff, it's not my people
That's beautiful
because
perspective.
yeah, yeah, it's just, and zero judgment. I was in that space, right? I mean, like a lot of us, I think we all kind of go through that phase. Some people never transition out of that. And again, zero judgment. Like if that is what you value, that's what you value. For me, it's not what I value, right? And that's why I can bring value to somebody who is running a 9-figure company, even though I've never run one myself, because that's not what we're measuring, right? We're measuring capacity to solve problems. That's the pain point for them. That's the value I bring. So it's a mesh, right? So it's minding what you measure. Right? Minding what you measure, because that's the important thing. When you know your value, like you're able to solve a problem. And that's why it's so important to listen. So that's what I love about networking. What removes the awkwardness is when I just look at people and I just ask them questions and let them talk. There's nothing, it's just cool. Awesome. Love it. And I listen, and it's just, I ask more questions, and that's opened up more big opportunities than anything else. Just not trying to sell anyone anything. I was not trying to prove. I wasn't, I just asked questions, and I love asking questions nobody gets. Like, what's the biggest unexpected lesson you've learned recently? Or what's the biggest, win or success? Just something that's just unusual, because again, it's part of that memorable conversation. And then at the end, you can just be like, oh, cool. You know what? Let's just continue efficient, networking. I would love to continue our conversation outside of the event where we could actually hear each other. So why don't you just scan my QR code? It'll text you my contact card. It'll text you a link to book a virtual coffee, and we can just connect more outside of here. And then I'll share all my goodies with you. So like, I'd love to connect more, right? Like, it's just an invitation, and it's super casual, and
There's value. There's
it
value.
works.
It's a value
Yeah.
driver, and regardless of where it ends up.
Well, it's
Yeah.
relationship. It's just there's always value in genuine connection. And that's number one what I bring. But you've got to know yourself. You've got to know your value as of self, and be able to be authentic and available to make a connection.
No. And I mean,
And then the opportunities unfold.
yes. I mean, like you said, so you basically have, let's say, a 9-figure mindset, and having adopted that and lived it, now you can help guide others to have either a fast growing or steady growing company that, or even a legacy that you can pass on and sell, so that you're not selling because you need to or you have to, or there's no succession plan. A lot of business, I think, what percentages of business, but I would say most of them just end. And that's a shame, because, you talk about building connections, relationships, what would it lead to if it just stops? And then there's no COO, there's no hierarchy, there's no assistant, there's one person who has all the keys.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's the bottleneck. That's why I brought the systems piece in, so intertwined with what I was doing on the inner work and the communication and the soft skills and the identity pieces and the behavior change. I was like, we need systems, whether it's soft systems like a piece of paper, or tech or software, like whatever. But when you bring the two together, that is what creates leverage for your legacy. And for the people who are like, ugh, systems, bleh, like, I'm like, but it's building systems with soul, right? You don't remove you from the flavor and the flair and the energy and the vibe of your systems, especially when you're automating. I bring all my humor and goofy science nerdy self to this stuff. It's super funny and snarky, and cracking jokes like abandoned cart. You get the text, squirrel, did you forget something? Did you get distracted? You left some in your cart.
There's studies behind that, right? And
Yeah,
we're all
it's just
students, and we
funny.
we see this, right? And like this idea of
Mhm.
following up with someone, like, for me, sometimes if someone texts me at night, like like you mentioned earlier, the instinct is to react or respond and saying, well, if I'm not organized enough in my systems, then I'll forget to respond to this person, and then I'll not get back to them, and then I'll be someone who doesn't keep my word, and then there's a whole like avalanche that falls down from there.
Oh, that's the fire. So we're reacting to everything all the time. But that avalanche, that cascade, is because we're so busy reacting to everything that's happening. There's no plan driving the vision forward. So people spin their wheels, stay in the sabotage cycle
Oh yeah,
forever.
I've sabotaged myself enough, and I think that it's more of a,
We all
yeah,
do.
it's like forgive
We all do.
yourself, dust yourself off, know you've learned some valuable lessons, like going back to school, and you don't need to repeat the grade.
Mm,
So
no,
what would you say? What would
exactly.
you say is like, you know something that you want to be remembered for? Like when one day you retire or step out of, being in this, full speed, and you want to slow down and enjoy life more, what would you say? You know, would you say, okay, how Stacy wants to be known as the person who did this?
Let's see. So, it's funny because where I'm at in my journey is, if I'm getting access to the people who have the large scale influence, that's far more important to me than being the direct influencer, right? Because it's leverage, right? So, yes, having one to many impact is vital, getting, bigger stages. I'm developing TV shows, things at large scale impact, to say, okay, if I can inspire more entrepreneurs and contractors in the new gig economy to start doing the right work sooner so they don't become a statistic and their business fails in between years 1 through 5, because they're the reason it fails, right? They're the bottleneck. If I can help reduce the number of businesses or entrepreneurs or solopreneurs that have that problem, like fundamentally, that would be yes, I hit my purpose impact goal of leaving a legacy, of helping more people be successful, being in control of their own income and outcomes in life, right? Now, that's one piece of it. But like I said, the influence in terms of the relationships to those who have the influence. So if I'm able to work in the background and help change policy, help change, the way things are done in a massively large way, because I get to work with some of those people who can impart change, then again, that is a massive legacy, where it's knowing how lives will be impacted long after I leave. Whether it's tied to my name or not, it doesn't matter.
Wow. I mean, so that's like the ripple
So,
effect, right?
exactly. And then, there's the other side of it. There's a massive lack of women in the Google search. When you search the most impactful and influential people in the world, there's only really 3 women that come up right now: Mel Robbins, Oprah Winfrey, Brene Brown. That's it. There's not a lot of very well-known Googleable women. Therefore, myself and I am bringing some women with me, right? To just be up there with the other men that are doing awesome, impactful things too. So, that would be the notoriety side of saying, hey, we're rising together to just add ammunition and amplification to the impact that we're making.
And then I think I'm definitely a strong supporter of that. And a lot of, you know, I just went through Jamie Kern-Lima's book, Worthy, right? And a lot of times she, and I've met her at my last book launch at Palm Springs, and this, beautiful soul, inspiring story, and, sharing those vulnerable moments in the growth journey where she was rejected, right? Somebody wanted to buy the company and then changed their mind. And it says, may I ask why you don't want to buy? And they're like, are you sure you really want to know? And they're like, yeah, I need to know. It's like, you're not pretty. And you don't look like the person who, and like all her deep, like it was like an arrow to the heart, the Achilles heel in her. She shared very openly. I'm like, and we all have those moments that even if we've done all the inner work, ouch, that hurt, right? But then later on, she met that person after a $1 billion exit, 9-figure exit, right? Uh, hey, thank you. Like, dude, thanks for not believing me. Because guess what? I would have sold out for a lot less. I would have had a smaller exit. It's for less impact on the world, right? And you're helping people kind of, like you said, clear out those bottlenecks, right? Get rid of the trash, clear the lens, right? And be able to see nicely into the future, right? That's great. It's inspirational and moves people in the right direction. And I would love to ask, more about how you expand into more creative avenues. Because, share about how, you've written a book. Now you're getting into new spaces. Like, what inspires you to move into new fields like television? And, what do you intend to produce and um, in that field?
So it's interesting because it's all the same core message, methodology, teachings kind of across the board that I started doing over a decade ago with my coaching. So it's the same stuff, it's just on different platforms, right? Same message in my books, So I think it's just distribution in different audiences, but it's still the same core because I know who I am. I know what my values are. I know what my business's values are, right? And so there's that brand continuity across the board because it's that same core message of just focusing more on what you can control helps you impact more the things you can't. It's that simple, but we overcomplicate
Yeah, yeah.
it.
It's like when someone says, "Wait, it can be that easy," and you're like, "But this and but," like, there's no buts. It just is, and shedding those layers of false identity builds a full self. And having been someone who had kind of like a broken vessel from which to,
We
well,
all
okay,
do,
I
right?
get it. And then, you share it openly now and it's all good. And, in these times where, when we share that, hey, look where I am now, but look where I kind of was. Right. And I'm not in there now. And I
Little.
wasn't crying on social about it during the time. I just kind of toughed it out, found my support circle, did the work. And now you see this. Right. And it's like, hey, you could achieve this too. that,
That's the best success, right? Where it's happening in
oh,
the
yeah.
background,
I mean, thank you
you
so
know?
much, Stacy. If there's any kind of last lessons or something you wanted to kind of impart to the audience, I welcome you to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. So some of my core takeaways, even though I had a couple of good ones today. Some like one-liners, some tweetable moments for Oprah, right? Is just remembering that all of this, right? Whatever it is that you're doing, personally, professionally, it doesn't matter. It's only as hard as you make it. You have the power to control how easy and effortless or painful and suffering the experience is, right? And that's a tough pill to swallow. It's just the more you lean into taking control of you, the easier it is to let go of all the stuff that's not within your control, that's totally draining you. And that's what helps you stay in your zone of genius. The more you can be in the energy of doing and being and experiencing the stuff that really lights you up, the stuff that feels effortless and energizes you, the better. So the rest of the stuff, even the superpowers, because superpowers are stuff you're good at, but they drain you, drain your energy. Automate, delegate, leverage those things where you can, or just eliminate it altogether. I'm an advocate for that. But that's all the stuff that creates leverage. So focus on you, create the leverage, love it, love all of the results.
And that's how we build a happy future, right? And some people, yes,
Fulfilling experience of life.
no,
Yeah.
definitely. And so, dear Oprah, if you're listening, feel free to call Stacy. I promise you. It took 4 years for Jamie Kern Lima to call you back. I think Stacy will call you back within a day, or maybe within an hour. So, like I said, we'll be tweeting this to Oprah, and hopefully her team will get back to you and call you onto her program, because I think it's time for you to step up to your, superpower, to join, like I said, that pantheon of great women who are inspirational leaders, right? And then bring others along the way, because that's what true, like, level 5 of John Maxwell's servant leadership, right? Because I think you talk a lot about being of service, is building other leaders.
Yeah. 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 We all rise together. So, it really is. It's like success is not a solo support. You are not going to do this alone.
No, and I want to thank you for the impact you've had on my growth and journey. And like I'm just a humble student. I go to these venues, and like I said, I go from not really feeling enough to feeling worthy and accepted. So I know next time I attend an event of yours, in Florida, which I love Florida above all states. It brings the sunshine, it brings the joy. Like, you know, you just need to make enough to get by, but then it's okay to have more than enough. Um, right? And like I said, you don't need much. You can be just in a humble place by the beach, but dinner is expensive. So you gotta work hard to make it, right? But like you said, if you build these delegation, automation channels, you will elevate and conquer that next um, barrier, whether it be real or artificial. So I really want to thank you for the impact and helping others be influential and step up to the plate and swing. And regardless of whether they miss or hit, they're in the game, and they're a player on the field. And like the Teddy Roosevelt person in the arena. He said man in the arena, but let's adapt it to modern times. Um, Stacy, how can people find you, work with you, and follow you online?
Yeah. Well, the cool thing with having a easily branded name, if you search Stacy Raske, generally on all platforms, I'm the first one that comes up because there's only like 2 or 3 in the world. So if you Google me, it's me. So I'm on all the platforms as Stacy Raske, and then stacyraske.com is a great central hub. It's kind of that link tree to all the things that we're doing. So if you need some systems and automations, you need some more leverage, whether it's internal or external, I am happy to chat with
Well,
you.
thank you for being so accessible and relatable. So I think that's the measure of a true leader, is knowing that even though we're in new rooms, you're still available. And I want to thank you for the impact you have and the lessons learned today. Thank you so much.
Oh, you are so welcome. Thank you for having me on and having this wonderful
Thank you. I look
conversation.
forward to next year's version of both of us. How we evolve and
Right?
enter the next channel and test that life will bring us. And thanks again,
Exactly.
Stacy.